Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I'm sorry for the delayed Wi-Fi connection. I don't know why that continues to happen. Um, Actually, I think I know what it is. It's probably when I use the green screen. So I'm going to begin and then try to take it off the green screen. But today I want to uh, welcome you to Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. We talk about global affairs, innovation, and all kinds of things going on in an increasingly turbulent world, politically, economically. I want to thank Mark Lee for bringing on a celebrity yesterday. I was actually traveling from Washington, D.C. and missed it, but I'm going to hopefully be able to host Jim Meskimen again in a couple months. And Mark is going to send me his link so I can practice his imitations. He's absolutely wonderful, and I'm just so bummed I missed it. But Mark, thank you for doing that. Looking forward to reaching out myself to him and thanking him for coming on the show. With that being said, I do have some insights to share with you after my trip to Washington. And some of the things we're going to talk about today before I begin my monologue is, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. So a couple things to talk about today. The Proud Boys are convicted of conspiracy. Politically weighted charge implies participation in rebellion. So the members of the right extremists should be sentenced in August. Justin Thomas continues to be, people are concerned about his ties to a conservative judicial activist, paying a Supreme Court justice's wife thousands for consulting work, and then paying for his own grandnephew to go to boarding school. But there's no violation of the law, just, conflict of interest, nothing uncommon for anyone in the public sector. There's a showdown over abortion happening in North Carolina. Republicans passed a bill yesterday to ban abortions after 12 weeks of pregnancy. This would narrow access significantly. The governor is expected to veto it, but it'll probably be overridden on his veto. COVID-19 was the major cause of death in the U.S. last year still, with about 500 people a day dying. And finally, before I begin my final insight of the week, tomorrow morning in the United States, 5 a.m. Eastern time, maybe 6 a.m., we will all be watching around the world King Charles III being coronated as the king. The ceremony will be at Westminster Abbey, and Charles III became the king when Elizabeth II died last September. 2,200 people will watch. He'll be driving in with a carriage with Camilla Parker Bowles, the princess, and his son Harry is attending. I'm going to binge watch much of The Crown tonight so I can get myself in the mood for the coronation, and looking forward to the Kentucky Derby. Go Canes. My final take of the week, and I'm just going to give you real quickly before we begin, is on Wednesday night, I had the honor of attending in the residence of His Excellency Indian Ambassador Taranjit Singh Sandhu, along with the designate to be the new United States Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, Governor Roy Cooper, a number of governors around the country, and companies from all around the nation of India who were there for the Select USA conference. Select USA is the largest global investment conference hosted by the United States Department of Commerce, with the primary focus of bringing in international investment. The ambassador was so excited to announce that this was the largest delegation provided by India. The largest delegation of companies coming in looking to invest in the United States was from the nation of India, the fifth largest economy in the world. I want to thank Governor Cooper for being there, along with Secretary of Commerce Michelle Sanders and Chris Chung from EDPNC, who continue to make the case, our governor, that North Carolina is doing its job to try to get better connected to India, to bring in companies like Infosys, companies like Wipro, companies like HCL, and Bharat Forge. At the end of the day, $40 billion of Indian money has invested in the United States, the soil of the United States, and the report presented to the ambassador-designate Garcetti, along with the ambassador Sandhu from the CII, was called Indian Roots, American Soil. $40 billion of investment, 425,900 jobs, $1 billion of R&D, and 195 million of social responsibility expenditure in all 50 U.S. states. North Carolina did not make the top 10. It was Texas, California, New Jersey, and Georgia that were topping the list. But I told the governor it was great to be a warm up act for him there. And hopefully we can get more aggressive to get more Indian companies coming in North Carolina. But I thought that was very insightful of kind of this economic connection. It was a wonderful week in DC. I'm addicted. I'm going back next week. I'm going back the following week. In fact, I'm going back to Washington every week, all the way up and now until September for my work. But I got to tell you, the city's really growing on me, and I'm looking forward to talking about some of these issues today. Well, let's welcome to the show Mark Lee and our other guests.
Yeah, we've got our regular panelists here and everything. So we do have Lee.
Good morning.
We've also got
Good morning.
Dan Wetson. And yes, we did have a good time. Of course, we've got the boss as well, Nick Palveda, and all in that space. I know that Shaquille had asked about one of our past guests, and I know that he was teasing about her being Dan's girlfriend, even though we know that that is not the case and everything. But, Wednesday was World Press Day. So World Press Day was a good day for Medea Benjamin to disrupt the folks once again. So I thought we'd play this little video just to make Dan happy and everything, because apparently Code Pink was at it again and they interrupted Anthony Blinken. So this took place on Wednesday while you were up there in D.C. So let's check out what Code Pink was up to. It's only a 35-second clip.
Stop the extradition request for Julian Assange. Excuse us, we can't use this day without calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. The Biden administration must free Julian Assange. Stop the extradition request for Julian Assange.
2 hours and not 1 word about
Has no legitimacy.
Not one word about Julian Assange Abdul who was murdered by the Israeli occupation forces in Palestine. Not one word about Julian Assange.
We're here to celebrate freedom of expression, and we just experienced it.
Well, that was what took place on that particular day. And like I said, we've had Medea Benjamin on the past and all in that space, but she chose
What a piece of work.
Disruption movements and all in that kind of way during World Press Freedom Day when Mr. Blinken was having his press conference about the freedom of the press and what was going on with the freedom of the press. And that was actually from their website, Code Pink, but I'd heard about that disruption earlier and everything. So after Shaquille had asked me what they were up to, I thought I'd go see what they were up to, and that's what I found out that they were up to. So that's what they were up to.
Mark, what are your thoughts on that? Is that acceptable?
Those kind of protests I do not think are acceptable, but I mean, I think that you can disrupt in a civil way and in a way that is more acceptable. I mean, that was kind of very abrasive, but then again, I'm a supporter of some of the protests that go on with the Moral Mondays, and some people would put that in a similar kind of thing. But Reverend Barber does do civil disobedience, and it definitely goes into the halls of. Matter of fact, I think they relaunched Moral Mondays this last week or two, and all in that space. But they do know that they are going to get arrested. I'm sure that even she knew she was going to get arrested as well, and it's not as it's disruptive, but maybe not as disruptive, but it does get the point across. So I do think that you can have protests that are disruptive. I mean, that has been part of the history of protests.
Does it get the point across in a positive way?
I mean, even Martin Luther King did sit-ins that were very disruptive, and there were others that did things that were very disruptive as well. So I do think that it is a fair method of protest, to answer your question.
I think it's a negative in that way of protesting, because you have a lot of people there who came for a reason, whatever the purpose of the speeches, the convention. You have this on college campuses also. You have heckler's veto. Well, people will get up and stop the speakers who were invited, and people who were invited, who planned their day to come hear the speakers. And then these people get up and they just disrupt. If you don't like it, protest maybe outside. Have a different venue where you have an argument why you disagree with these people. But to stop people from speaking?
Yeah, I mean, but that's been going on for a while. You just heard.
No, I understand that.
And it's on both sides. I mean, the Proud Boys have disrupted things. I know that there was a threat that was going on.
Hey, Mark, no one.
Both sides are not.
Your arguments are
This has nothing to do with sides. It has to do with just basic human behavior. I mean, basic
etiquette.
You don't disrupt speakers while they're out speaking. Yes, they should be thrown in jail. Okay, then they also should be sued civilly. Very important. Yeah. They should have a civil suit, strip them of all their assets, and see how much they like it. I don't care if they were on our show or not. That is not how you behave in a civil society. So I have to agree with Lee. If you want to protest, you go outside. You can do all the protests you want. You do not interrupt the speakers.
Speaking of protests, let's go. We're going to come back. Anyway, guys, I wanted to just share that insight with India. And, we don't have to talk about today, but I thought it was very interesting, the level of investment and seriousness, particularly with manufacturing. So if you're in this country, around the world or country, I would really say that there is a great opportunity for these companies to come in here and invest from our part of the world. We actually have an office in Bangalore, India. But, the bottom line is that a lot of these companies are, I would say 30% are in pharma and about 21% in IT and then 18% in manufacturing, which I found interesting. So, I think it's interesting to see, this continued focus on economic relations to India. The question is, how do we handle the political relationship between the U.S. and India with Russia and Ukraine? But there is strong economic ties, and I think it's a good opportunity for us. What I learned from it is that we need to leverage that economic tie because it's going to be really hard to do this with China.
Steve,
So,
does it make sense to switch our manufacturing to India versus China based on our relationship with them?
No, you're missing the point. They're moving manufacturing to the U.S. jobs. The jobs that I cited, 425,000 jobs, are jobs being created in the soil of the United States from Indian companies investing. So, yeah. So, but yeah.
No, I get that, but we have a lot of manufacturing, Apple, what have you, in China.
Yeah.
Maybe India is a better place to have that.
I think India is actually getting better infrastructure, and it's a good place to do manufacturing. Although I will tell you that the tier 1 cities are getting quite expensive. So really, you're not going to reduce cost much by moving it over to India, quite frankly. I mean, this is happening even in software development. But who knows, whether one thing we haven't talked about is we don't even know if we're going to have software development anymore, because now they're saying AI can do software development. So, what's that going to do with the computer science graduates that go out and get software development jobs? Because now they're saying that with the new AI tools that are coming out even as early as this fall, you can develop software through AI.
Is that the end of coding?
What?
Is that the end of all these coding jobs?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because the thing is, they'll give them something else to do. They'll do it.
So,
Steve, what's the problem that we have here in the United States? Because I know that Vietnam is building a factory, a big auto factory here in North Carolina. So you're telling me the Americans don't have the capital to put the manufacturing places here in the United States. The Americans don't have the talent to build a car manufacturing facility here in the United States. We have to go to Vietnam. Americans don't have the talent to build farm factories, pharmaceutical factories here.
That's a great question. But I think that's
what is wrong with the United States of America that we have to go overseas to Vietnam and India to bring the talent, the finance, and the economy into the United States? What's the problem here?
Well, I think, Lee, Nick, you can do both. I mean, I think that you first of all, we're competing with other nations of the world. So we want to be, I want to commend Governor Cooper and our Commerce Secretary for getting VinFast to open up in North Carolina, because it's going to create thousands and thousands of jobs. And we want those jobs in North Carolina, in the U.S., and other nations around the world want it. This is competitive. So other nations are competing, but every state in the union was competing for these companies that were coming not only from India, but Germany, Europe, all over the world. With that being said, yes, we can and we should be developing our own manufacturing jobs. And that's exactly what they're trying to do with the CHIPS and Science Act, actually incentivizing and focusing more chip and semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. by our own U.S. companies like Wolfspeed, which is in North Carolina. Today, most of the semiconductor chip manufacturing is done in Taiwan. Now, as a moderator of the show, I know we tend to bash Biden and Trump as political analysts, but I think in this case, you got to give Biden and his administration credit for the CHIPS Act, and also the Republicans in the Congress and Senate that worked with them to pass it. Just like I would give President Trump credit for the vaccine, and I also would give former President Trump the credit for creating this awareness of the fact that we weren't manufacturing enough, creating enough manufacturing jobs. Because had it not been for Donald Trump, Joe Biden, his successor, wouldn't have been able to do that. So sometimes we forget on that show that I'm trying to be an analyst here. There's things about Trump I didn't like, but I'm not going to say that, But anyway, yeah, I think that's what both former President Trump and now the current president are trying to do, is get American companies to manufacture more jobs here. Anyone have any, before we go to Sasha Star in Ukraine, any insight on that? Jatovi?
Is it well, when Nick was talking about the issue that a lot of these companies and building overseas and not having the talent and so on and so forth, is it most of the problem due to the fact that it's cheaper to do things overseas? For example, our labor laws make it a lot tougher for these giant companies doing these doing these manufacturing stuff. They can't pay those extremely, basically play cents on a dollar to have something manufactured in North Carolina is different because you have to pay a particular wage. Overseas in different areas, you don't have to do that. Hence the reason you have Nike being called out every single year for the cheap labor and their conditions. And same thing with, I think, what is it, Foxconn paying those for the parts for Apple and other PlayStations and so on and so forth. The electronic costs. It's cheaper to pay not only the labor but also everything else overseas. And hence the reason why it's tougher to have those giant manufacturers build here, and those businesses are what's they're the ones choosing to go overseas and not stay here. Is that correct?
I'd say you're
go ahead. You go now.
Actually, Vietnam is coming to the United States, specifically North Carolina, to build and open up a factory here to manufacture electronic cars. All that is good, except why isn't that the Americans aren't building their own factory here in North Carolina and producing electronic cars? I mean, why are we relying on Vietnam? I don't think.
Well, no, Jovi, let me answer the question. I don't think we're only relying on Vietnam. It's just that we're playing the game of economic development. I mean, if we're not going to get those jobs, some other state's going to get those jobs. So every state in the country, that's why you have Select USA. They bring in companies from all around the world. Will Manchin was there. I didn't meet him, but he was there at the conference, apparently marketing West Virginia, believe it or not. They actually had a lot of Japanese and German investment in my home state of West Virginia. But I think to answer Jatovi's question, Jatovi, part of the problem is, take India, for example. Over the years, most of the technology work on the back end was done in India. But what we've seen is that the wages are going up in India. The real estate prices are going up, almost equivalent to what it is in the U.S. or even more. In fact, it costs more in Mumbai, Delhi, for an apartment than it does in New York City, in Manhattan. So it's not like it was back when the costs were low. So what that does in these tier one cities is the cost isn't as cheap anymore. So then companies say, well, I'm going to go do it in the U.S. where I might be at the same cost, but I have more talent. I have a trained workforce, which sometimes they don't have. India has a lot of trained people in technology, but they don't have a community college system. They don't have things like that. And I think that, and the second thing is infrastructure. So I know, Jatovi, you live in Durham, right?
Yep.
Okay, so if I were in India today and I was going to drive the relative distance from here to Durham, it would take me about 5 hours. And so the quality of life, when I was with Elaine Marshall, we had a meeting 10 kilometers away from the hotel. It took us 3 hours to get there. So the infrastructure, they're making investments in roads and transportation, but the infrastructure is so bad: water, energy, electricity, roads, infrastructure, that eventually people say, it's not worth doing the business here, so I'm going to go to US, I'm going to go to Canada. So anyway, that's.
Hey, Steve, along those same lines, and actually I would not usually be at the Heritage Center daytime, that is on a Thursday, but I was yesterday because they were doing a economic forum. Actually, Mayor O'Neill was there. It was actually with the Institute, which used to be the Institute for Minority Economic Development. And one of the things that they brought up that I'd love to hear people's thoughts about, because even Nick has brought it up and everything, is that how in certain cultures, including the Indian cultures, and in certain cultures, even in the United States, the whole notion of learning about your finances, knowing what your FICO score is, knowing your credit rating, knowing a number of these other things are almost ingrained from birth. Unfortunately, there are other groups, including the Latin and the minority communities, that it is not as ingrained. And that was one of the things that folks were saying needs to be changed. That needs to be something that is talked about at an earlier age than it actually is. And they were trying to encourage people to learn those kind of things, because there are certain communities that are more ingrained in having a financial stake than others, and that is because of some historical injustices and all in that space. But it was quite interesting to hear both Elaine O'Neill bring this up, who is the mayor here in Durham, as well as others that were there in attendance. Like I said, it was a small group, but they're hoping to expand to have massive community discussions, and they covered everything from gentrification to economic growth, and making sure that it was spread fairly when it was this kind of developments that are taking place in Durham, for example, and in other parts of the triangle as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts as to whether we need to do a better job of educating, and particularly those groups that are not being as educated as an earlier age, because there are certain places and certain cultures that it's like almost from the time you're born, you're having these conversations, and it's not the case in all societies and all cultures.
Mark, maybe we just stress STEM courses more.
Before we, and let's answer that. Then let's answer that real quickly around the table, and then we want to get to Sasha's story to get a quick update on Ukraine. But
we've also got the Ukrainian show at 11 o'clock, so we can definitely have that update. But we've also got the show at 11 as well.
Well, I'll let everyone else answer, and I'll share my input. But go ahead, guys, folks. I have some input on it.
Mark, you any thoughts? Maybe we should go back to teaching the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic, and science courses. The STEM courses.
I mean, I'm a big fan of teaching STEM courses and teaching even some of the things that are in the robotics field. I've told you that there is a youth arts intensive at that same location, and definitely the gentleman from Cisco, Renee Daughtry, has been teaching kids about drones and teaching them about coding. I heard somebody mention coding earlier and all in that space, but unfortunately, a lot of the courses like that are not necessarily on the school grounds. They're oftentimes done in independent situations like what this is, where he brought this to the area, and he might even be looking at bringing some aviation courses as well, because we used to have some aviation that was taught when there was a flight simulator at that location, but that person took the simulator up to Virginia, but there might be some possibilities of bringing it back to the area.
So Mark, is it quite possible? And I guess I'm in an inquisitive questioner mode today, but is it quite possible what you're talking about? Is it that ingrained piece? Mm-hmm. Is that due to the exposure that certain communities have over others, due to that financial barrier that other communities don't have? For example, I would
agree with that, and that's part of what the conversation was, with those barriers and how those barriers exist, and they need to be addressed, and actually those barriers need to be eliminated. So yes, I would definitely agree with you on that.
Even when we talk about STEM classes, which I know a lot of the schools are trying to get back into. For example, I was talking to a little child the other day from one community, and he was talking about how his favorite class was the STEAM class, which of course is the extra piece of STEM. I think it's science, technology, so on and so forth.
Engineering, arts, and math, I believe it is.
Yes. So he was talking about that's his favorite class, but then you ask another individual, that's not their favorite class, because they don't have that. They don't have the economics around that in the school that they are at.
Well, I think, and I'm going to throw a stab in here before we get to some quick updates, but I think this is a really critically important issue, is making sure we're leveraging education, particularly now at a time when I think we're going to see one of the most aggressive displacement of jobs in white-collar workforces in America and around the world because of AI. And I think a lot of minority communities have not had the educational opportunities And it's not so much, it's about racial discrimination, but education is what enables you to move up in society, to get more income, to buy more things. And I'm going to give credit to the immigrants from India who are very strong in STEM. They came in with strong STEM background and they went into science, education, math, and they've done very well. So today, Indian Americans are in the 0.5% top income earners in the United States, with leading companies like Microsoft and Google being run by Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella. These are people that were educated in India but came in and advanced their education and invested a lot. These kinds of opportunities have to be for all people of color, Black Americans, Latino Americans, but it's education. And I'll end with this. Think about India. India today has 60% of the population under the age of 26 years old age. What this means is Prime Minister Modi is making an aggressive investment in education. We've been talking about broadband for a year in North Carolina. Out of the $1 billion we've gotten, I would say I've heard that we haven't even connected 10% of what we were going to do across the rural state. India in the last 2 years has connected 340 million to the internet in rural villages. So what does that mean? Why is Modi doing this? Well, he's not a dumb guy. He realizes that if he has global talent and he connects people to the internet, what are they going to be able to get? Education, right?
Mhm.
They get education, they're going to be able to catch up. And make no mistake, he wants to be the number one economy in the world. Okay, so I'll end with that. I think it's a real wake up call, and we're debating abortion all day and all night. These social issues, and every minute that we do this, we're wasting away time on what we should be talking about, which is
Well, Steve, before you move on, two things I want to touch on, because completely agree with your take on education. Because I will say it till I'm blue in the face, because it's something I believe wholeheartedly. The best way to fight gentrification is through education. If you know your worth, somebody can't come in and take away. It makes it harder for somebody to come in and take away what you have and then sell on top of that and make billions where they're robbing you simply doing that. And this is one of the big things which, Steve, I would love your help on. The big project that I'm working on in Durham, which is similar to pushing that whole education piece. Because as we talk about this education and how kids being exposed and so on and so forth. And again, finance is a barrier to that. The thing that we have most of all is time. And so I'm working on a project to try and push through this whole education piece in Durham and try and develop a lot of these kids, giving them opportunities through education to understand and move on and actually improve themselves. So it's a big project, Steve. I don't really want to, I guess, market it here because it's the show and it's your show and I don't want to do that. So I would love to talk with you more about that offline, about how we can utilize what's going on right now in terms of a lot of the education pushes that are happening throughout the country to push education within Durham and make this a model that we could utilize throughout the country, because I think it's something that can be taken forward. It's a very big project that I would love you to be a part of.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Let's go to Sasha Star real quick to get it. I know we got his show at 11, and Sasha, I hope I can come on. I want to come back on your show. It's been a few months. But tell us a little bit about Ukraine and Russia. And there's been talk this week about Ukraine being involved with trying to have a drone attack to kill Putin. Not sure if that's true. Any insight there on what we're doing?
Well, the story is that there is an existential fight between Russia and the rest of the world, and it could grow into a thermonuclear war, simply because there are just too many warheads exist on both sides, and it's becoming more and more intolerable situation where Russia is mercilessly attack the civil target, killing people daily in Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have enough sophisticated systems to defend itself, unfortunately. So that continues on and on every day in different places, including Kiev, Kherson, and just many other places, killing many, many civilians. That's a situation where we are. West
Gosh,
not step back. It's already involved in this war. And to step back, it means defeat. It means another yet defeat for the West. For the United States, it's not enough Vietnam. It's not enough Afghanistan and Iran. And just any point, you forget already when last time U.S. won any war whatsoever. And now it's not even fighting the war. Ukrainians do. All they do is they supply or trying to supply weapons, but probably they're not doing that very successfully. I don't understand the hold on F-16 fighters jets, which would tremendously help Ukrainian attack. And there are not any more red lines. Now about this drones exploding over Kremlin. Yes, there is a version that Russian insinuated this attack themselves. On the other hand, I wouldn't discount that Ukraine could do that. They have ability to do that, and if they did it, it would be great. Unfortunately, I don't think so. I don't think Ukrainians did it because the idea is to as Russians say, to kill their leader Putin. It's a atrocious idea because the attack was around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Putin is not at his place of work at this time. Never, never. And in fact, these drones could carry some meaningless, it's like a grenade sort of device that could explode. And there was a dome, then there was a under the dome was the conference hall, and only under conference hall was the Putin's cabinet. So the likelihood of killing Mr. Putin with this device is equal to exactly zero. So this is, of course, Russian-made provocation, so they can justify their atrocious attacks on Ukrainian civilians. That's what's going on. But I'll tell you, Ukrainians are in a state of mind. They don't care about anything. They don't care about the nuclear attack or anything at all. They will fight until the bitter end. And in Russia, for Russia to prevail in this war, you have to kill 40 plus million Ukrainian people. That's where we are right now.
Foster, just a quick question.
Yes.
What started this war? Wasn't it partly that Russia thought that Ukraine was going to join NATO? Am I right? Or
they can think anything what they want with their rotten brains. They can allow to think.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but would it not have been helpful? I know it's a little hindsight. Had Zelensky originally, at the beginning, said, "You know what? We have no intentions of joining NATO." Why didn't he do that?
He did that in December of 21, 2 months approximately before invasion. He said that Ukraine will not join NATO. He said exactly that.
I didn't hear
He
that.
did.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, he did. He did.
He
He
did
said
say
that.
that?
But
Okay, thank you.
it wasn't good enough for Russia. He wanted
Evidently.
to have NATO assurances that Ukraine will not be part of NATO. And NATO was not prepared to give this assurance.
Why not? Why wouldn't they have done that to save a war?
I'll tell you why. Because under NATO rules, any country that applies for its membership and being approved by all existing members of NATO will become a member of NATO. So NATO had to, in fact, derail their own policy and change their constitutions, their rules, essentially because of Russia's demand. That's unheard of. It's never going to happen.
I'm sorry. Stop. So anyone who applies gets automatic membership? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not. There are two
No. Decision.
Hold on. The country has to first apply for membership. Number
Got
two,
it.
all existing members have to agree to that. So
Okay.
even if only one member is against, that's it. There is no NATO membership. So Putin wanted to say 27 countries all agree to change their rules and make commitment that even if country will apply for membership, so they will say no. Or how they should even if it's not wanted to play a game with Russia. So so NATO would have to say that all countries can apply for membership provided that it's approved by all members except Ukraine. Here is one country in the world that even if they will apply, it's automatically rejected. Is that what Russia wanted? And that what Russia should have got?
My only question is, why does that even matter? If they're a sovereign nation, another nation shouldn't be able to tell them if they can or can't join whomever, correct?
You see, Russia's understanding of the world order is so-called a sphere of influence.
Yeah.
That's what Russia got
Yeah.
as a result of the Second World War in 1945. So the agreement was that, okay, Russia will rule the Eastern Europe, the countries like Poland, Romania, and many others. In exchange that the West will rule part of Germany, which became Western Germany, West Germany. And now Russia, because all this collapsed in 1991, but one side of this world order just disappeared, just nowhere to be found. It's gone. So the new world order had to be agreed upon. That's why I'm so critical of President Bush, elder Bush Sr., that he failed to understand that, okay, the Cold War is over. U.S. and the West won. No, they didn't prevail or they were better or so on. They won, hands down, the Cold War.
I think we got caught sleeping in the wheel. And before we get into some domestic issues, I want to touch on the Clarence Thomas issue. But this is something very intriguing. What happened to the world order, the international rules system we've had in place since World War II, that we celebrated in 1992 when I graduated from college, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of democracy in Eastern Europe, is now coming to an end. Every single country is going authoritarianism, dictatorship, isolationism, and I think I'm going to have to go back and read the Post-American World book by Fareed Zakaria, where he talks about that, because I think we're now reaching, and I don't know why it is, whether their economies just weren't getting big enough and they ended up going back to dictatorship. I think at the end of the day that it's fair to say that the world is a lot less safer today than it was after the Cold War. I mean, think about
it. Steve, isn't part of the problem, to come back to what Sasha was saying, that, and I know he's not the biggest fan, and I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan, but isn't part of the problem that some of the historical figures still had old world order in their mindset? Because let's be very clear, George Bush Sr. was part of the CIA, so I don't know that he ever got out of that mindset and everything. So like I said, he still had that kind of mindset, and I don't know that he ever got out of that mindset.
I love the way Sasha Starr put it, and I want to spend the last 10 minutes going into some of the other issues we talked about. But the point is this, Mark, after George Bush's presidency and after the 8 years of Reagan, it was declared by the United States of America that the Cold War is over. And, we were dealing with Boris Yeltsin, and then Putin came into power, and we were underestimating Putin. We were acting like he was his ally, and they were getting the economy going. They were getting a lot of oil. They were getting international investment. Things were looking good. And then all of a sudden, he returned.
But isn't that one of the oldest tricks of the CIA, though, is that you put these supposed people that are probably more your enemy than your ally, but you treat them more as your ally because you want to kind of maneuver them, and you think that you can maneuver them. And I think that in my mind, and I could be wrong, I don't know the man personally, never met him, but I think that Bush probably still had that CIA mentality where he was thinking that he was doing the same thing that he might do to, say, the president of Venezuela or some of these other countries, that that they have them evil in their heart, but you are hoping to use them as a pawn in your game and all of that nature. So that, I think it was just another CIA gamemanship move that turned badly against him.
Mark, thank you. You see, Bush was running the biggest, the most influential country in the world. It's nothing to do with his personal impressions of what to do with Russia or um, his CIA experience or so on. Each war ends with a new world order. It was happening after First World War, Second World War, and Cold War, which some people believe was actually the Third World War. Once it's ended, and it's ended around 89, 90, but 91, it's technically ended because one of the participants of the World War ceased to exist. There was no longer a Soviet Union. So now, when there are 15 republics, including Russia, on the place of the former Soviet Union, what United States had to do to talk individually to each of these 15 countries. Therefore, they would undermine completely Russia as a leader of this post-Soviet territory, and it would treat each republic with dignity, make arrangements. It could separately make arrangements about nuclear weapons with Ukraine, with Belarus, with Kazakhstan, which had nuclear arsenal. Instead, they allowed Russia for a song to acquire all these arsenals, technology, everything else. And by the way, a few days ago, Clinton agreed and recognized that he made a big mistake in 1994 when he was doing that. At least he had dignity. And this Angela Merkel, on the other hand, she said that, well, Russia is a great country and so on and on and on. Well, listen, she was born in Eastern Germany. She was a member of the Communist Party, and she will die as a member of the Communist Party. So I don't expect anything from her. She made Russia so strong today, including financially. She did that with continuing the policy of her predecessor, Mr. Schroeder, who became a traitor and who became one of the officials of the Gazprom, the Russians' biggest gas company. So this is thanks to the West that Russia get very quickly to the level of where they are today. If they would act it, the United States would act it and West differently in 1992, right after the demise of Soviet Union, we would live in different world today.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Also,
Hey, Steve,
Steve,
I'm getting tossed it back to you, but I got a
Mark,
quick.
hold on. I was just gonna say, to tag on what Sasha said. I think, Steve, one of the big things that the reason why it hasn't, there's that old adage where if you cut off the head of, I mean, not saying, at the time snakes or calling anybody snake, but when you cut off the head of a snake, then 4 or 5 others come up, correct? So if we take that analogy and think about, how, after every war, there's no true follow-up. And we don't really continue to make those advances because we've already bred the hatred for killing and all the death that takes place. Then even when you make a friend in a place where there was all that death and all that destruction that you've just created, there's still hatred in the hearts of some people that you've already you've never really made amends with, even though they aren't the people that we went in to harm or arrest. Say with in Iraq, we left a whole huge power vacuum and never filled that power vacuum or even tried to fix that power vacuum. It was went in, got, and left. With Gaddafi, went in, got, and left. And so
yes,
I think
that's a great, absolutely.
To my previous
and Afghanistan. Afghanistan the same way.
And my final take before
hatred has happened.
we're going to spend the last We're going to spend the last 10
may
minutes
add
on some of the
something.
other issues, but go
May
ahead.
I add something to my previous comment? Russia got into a commanding position in the United Nations as one of the winners of Second World War. Okay, so there are 5 members: the U.S., England, France, Russia, China. Okay, now they're all nuclear powers and all that stuff. However, they were not winners, but rather losers of Third War, if you want to call it Cold War. Yes, they are losers. So how as the losers they can still remain in their position in the United Nations? Furthermore, interestingly enough, when Soviet Union disappeared, Russia very quietly said that, okay, we assume role of the Soviet Union. Why? Russia never was formally accepted in United Nations, period. There is no business for them even to be there, because there was never a process, a due process. When you initiate a new member, you have to make the conference, you have to agree upon, and so on. That's never been done with Russia. Soviet Union was a member, but Soviet Union ceased to exist. So there were like 209 members. Once Soviet Union ceased to exist, it's only 208 members. Now, a new member, Russia, can apply to become a member of the United Nations, and it failed to do that. There never was a procedure. So therefore, the place in United Nations of Russia is completely illegal. It doesn't have a stance. And Ukraine already made a presentation on that theme, and it's going to be a discussion about membership of Russia in United Nations. In my opinion, all United Nations has to be gone. It's completely inefficient organization. There is no any use, any positive from their actions. They have to be gone. Period.
Hey, let's and my final take on it. We got 5 more minutes, or 8 more minutes left before closeout. The final point I'll make is that I think you all, Jacoby, you have raised some really good points, and Sasha, but we have a tendency in U.S. foreign policy to invade and then let them go and think their democracy is going to rise up from anywhere. And point number one, I think this is a flaw in U.S. foreign policy from almost every major president going back. We've had 9, presidents in the last modern era, and I think it started with Vietnam, but then we underestimated the Gulf War. We underestimated, obviously, Afghanistan. The list goes on. And I think we underestimate how important democracy is, that you need to have institutions that keep democracy strong. You have to have people that understand it. Otherwise, people are going to have an election, and the next week a dictator is going to come in. This is happening.
Steve, a lot of cultures don't like democracy.
No, and Steve,
because
and Lee,
America,
hold on a second. Steve and Lee, one of the
you have
one
to
thing
have
that happens even in democracy is, and I think that it is a key point of democracy. It comes back to one of the things we were talking about at the beginning of this show, is the notion of dissent. And I think that you have the right to dissent in that space. Hold on a second.
That was my final point I was trying to make, because we're running out of time, is that you have to have a society that the government is strong enough to prevent chaos, but one that respects civil society. And that is the secret sauce of the United States of America. As much as we criticize our nation, there is no democracy that is stronger than the nation that we live in right now. And I want to thank Dan Worthington and all the veterans who served our country. This is something all of us can agree on. You can't go in and insurrect on a Capitol and have a coup in the United States. You're going to be committed. You can't. Yeah, things are bad. Things are divided. But I'm not as negative, even as President Biden, democracy is under attack, democracy is demise. No, democracy has never been stronger in America, because we have a strong government, but we also have a civil society. I can go outside and burn the flag of a man like Dan Worthington, who fought for our country, because that is my right as an American, and I will not go to prison. It's advanced citizenship.
Well,
that's the beauty of our country.
I think the one thing
everything you said was great, but I think instead of democracy and other nations when we leave, I think we need diplomacy.
Yeah.
That's what we leave out.
We
Because
do
other
need that
nations,
diplomacy.
it's not. I disagree with Lee saying that other nations don't want it. I think there are citizens that do, and I think democracy can be built. But I think through diplomacy we can get education and understanding and a connection, and that's where that development of democracy can come about, and that strong connection. Everything you said can get there, but I think a lot of the nations have a long path before they can get there.
Toby, just to clear up, I agree with you. The people want it, but those in power don't.
That's where
Toby
diplomacy
and
comes
Lee
into
along
play.
those same lines, and I don't know what folks' thoughts are, and I know we're winding down, but earlier, Steve, when he came on, he mentioned a couple of iconic events. Like I've always wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby, but the other one was the coronation, and apparently they are going to be really tight on the disruptions, and I'm not sure how I exactly feel about that because the police chief in charge of security in Windsor has said he's going to have a low tolerance for disruptions caused by the protests due to the iconic nature of the coronation. And he admitted that they have to balance the right of protest with the right of those attending to enjoy the events. But the human rights group Liberty said that Bunt's comments, and that was the constable there, Christian Bunt, were setting a really dangerous precedent that would discourage lots of people from feeling able to stand up for what they believe in. And the environmental activist group Just Stop Oil said the move was not about protecting the rights of spectators, but silencing dissent. So dissent is something that we oftentimes have to acknowledge exists, and that we need to let those folks that have a dissenting voice have their voice heard.
Okay, any comments from anybody about Trump refusing to participate in primary debates of the Republican Party?
I don't think it's a positive thing, Sasha.
Sorry?
I think he should show up. I don't think it's positive. I think he should show up.
I think so. Although he claims that he has such a lead, like 40% against everybody else, so there's no need for him to debate. However, if it doesn't matter what's his lead now, we don't know what's lead will be in 6 or 12 months' time. But if his policies are so good and sound or so on, he is the best one to voice them and present them, right?
Agreed.
Hey, Lee,
I mean, he's
just
not
really
going to debate
quickly,
because
Lee, just really quickly, I was wondering, did you think that this act, because I'm going to tell you what the act is, that London put in is something that we should have here? Because the Public Order Act, which they just passed in London, introduces a 12-month prison sentence for protesters who block roads and a 6-month prison sentence or unlimited fine for anyone who locks themselves on to other people, objects, or buildings. So they will be able to.
That's a good segue, Mark. One, Trump is he'll end up debating because he needs that video. That's part of his ego. That's what he did last time when he said he wasn't going to debate and then turned around and debated. But then talking about what you're saying, that goes against the First Amendment right to the freedom of speech and the right to protest, which could bring us to exactly what Steve wanted to talk about with Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court.
Jacoby, how does it go against the First Amendment? You have no right to impede the movement of somebody else. That's called kidnapping.
I have a right to protest, correct?
You have no right to stop me from my movement from going to school, hospital, work, legally, on the sidewalk, not blocking traffic. You have no right to block traffic.
In England, you don't.
I have a right to hold you down, and you want to go to work?
That's not a protest.
Kidnapping. That's called kidnapping, Toby.
No, it's not. It's not.
You're stopping people from moving.
Yeah, I think.
Let me help you, Lee. Here's an explanation. So
Thank you.
When I walk across the street, and that's not I mean, I could be carrying a picket sign, correct?
Yeah, but you're not stopping other people from walking.
And if you stop at a pedestrian walkway because I'm walking across the street, is that kidnapping?
But when you stop other people from going across.
Yes or no? Yes or no? You're doing these extremes. If I'm walking across the street as a pedestrian and you stop, is that kidnapping to you?
I'm stopping why? So I don't bump into you?
Yeah.
Normally not, as long as it's for momentary.
There we go.
As long as it's for a moment.
We can put to bed the hyperbolic. It's kidnapping when a protester is protesting walking across the street.
So if you're driving on the street and I sit down in front of
the definition of a protest. The definition of actually, the purpose of a protest is to bring awareness to an issue.
Disrupt.
And their way of bringing awareness to an issue is by stepping in front of you. That happens. That happens all the time. That is part of our freedom of protest.
I hear your point. I hear your point, Jacoby. Why do cities need to?
I haven't finished. I
apologize. You can finish, then I'll go.
Okay, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try and get through it real quick. So that right to protest, the walking across the street, that is not. I mean, even if I'm impeding your way in a car, that is bringing awareness. That is the point of that. Treating that as if that's kidnapping, that's incorrect, because then you're saying any pedestrian that stops you across the street is kidnapping. And then on top of that, if you're telling me that I cannot cause a protest and that protest must be in a way that is palatable to you, you're going to ignore my protest. Therefore, it's not even a protest. It's just, somebody walking, you're not even going to walk, just going to understand. So when you're walking and protesting, just like they did with the civil rights era, that happened. Now you're saying that every protest that happened in the civil rights area is just truthfully kidnapping. So MLK Jr. is just kidnapping people. That's a big lie. Protest is a part of our country. It's a part of our history. Those 13 stars that you have behind you came from a protest. So therefore, to say that, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to stop me because it's unfair to me, it's causing kidnapping and impeding my way is kidnapping to me, that's not true. That's
Jacoby, that's a nice speech. What happens when you're jaywalking and you tell the cop, sorry, I'm just protesting, leave me alone?
They'll allow you to go if you're protesting and have a.
Not if you're jaywalking. A lot of cities, they'll give you a ticket.
Yes, they will. They'll allow you to go.
They will not. You will get a ticket and you'll be arrested.
You're bringing up hyperbole and not even actually debating the point.
It's realistic. Why do cities have regulations about parades? You got to get a permit. Why do you get a permit for a parade?
Yeah, that's right.
Did MLK Jr. get a permit about a parade?
A parade and a protest are two different things. That is.
Yeah, that's right. You go to Fifth Avenue, you need a permit for a parade.
Lee, a parade is not a protest, correct?
What is it?
A parade
What's the difference?
is not a protest.
What's the difference?
Lee, so you're saying a parade is a protest?
What is the difference?
Lee, I'm asking you a question. You brought it in. You have to prove your point. Is a parade a protest?
I see no difference.
Prove it.
As a group of people, one or more walking down impeding traffic.
We'll debate this on Monday. We did not talk about a number of issues because we went over time. My closing remarks is on Monday we'll talk about Justice Clarence Thomas, this whole idea of conflict, but really no violation of law. But maybe there needs to be more stringent laws for public officials or judges to receive gifts and things like that. But it is concerning of the potential conflict of interest. I think we will, look into it and talk about that. We're going to continue.
We'll definitely get into that. I know you're getting to get to your closings. We do have guests next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, including some from the evangelical community and the political community, and they will be joining us. I think the first one is on Monday, and we do have them on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So I'm lining up guests left and right. So we will be having folks coming on.
Well, I really don't have a closeout today. I just want to wish everyone a happy Cinco de Mayo, which is recognized in the 5th day of May. And Cinco de Mayo was, let me tell you real quickly the significance of it. It's a holiday that celebrates the date of the Mexican Army's 1862 victory over France at the Battle of Puebla during the Franco-Mexican War. It always falls on May 5th, and it's known as the Battle of Puebla Day. Although it's a minor holiday in Mexico, in the United States, it's evolved into a commemoration of Mexican culture and heritage, particularly in areas of large Hispanic Mexican American population. So if you're in the U.S., get a margarita, get a taco. We're going to do ours tomorrow because we're all busy today. But happy Cinco de Mayo. Looking forward to a great Kentucky Derby. Wishing the Carolina Hurricanes all the best as they try to continue to advance to the Stanley Cup. And on that note, we'll be talking about all these issues and others. I want to thank you from our family and Pod and Roku TV for being with us today on World Edition. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Be safe wherever you are in the world. Thank you.